some people in the comments last night were like, "Oh, you should, I don't get it, Evan. You should be more, And I'm like, no, we knew it was gonna be a close series. Toronto made the necessary adjustments going into game 2. They executed them well. They were a little bit better. Bruins will make adjustments going into game 3, hopefully.
Yes. I also cannot remember the last time like the Bruins won a game 2 on home ice in the playoffs. I think it's like
It has been a long
it is like a
time.
scheduled loss every single time.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Prize Picks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Make the games a little more fun. Go check out our friends over at Prize Picks. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. I'm glad to be back. It's funny, we're back together at TD Garden, which is great. So we can have like our intermission debriefs. But post game, it's been me and Carl Corzini. So it's been different. It's fun. People love Carl. Like a lot of the comments, like, "Wow, this is really insightful."
You guys are both crushing it. I highly recommend if anyone, whether it's especially on YouTube, anything like that, want to get a measured, fair analysis of a game right afterwards. Where I feel like most of the time, Evan, like after games, people are throwing out the hot takes. It's all about like
Yes.
Mark Swayman, those kind of things. You guys actually broke down the game in a very rational sense. You even got compliments from Maple Leafs fans. So
thank you. First of all,
I would like to say, salute to both you guys. And if anyone wants to, delve a little bit deeper into some of these games, definitely go check out Evan and Carl's breakdowns.
Definitely check the one out on Wednesday night because I'm missing my men's league championship for it. So it's I was walking home with Haggs the other night, walking back to our cars, and I told, and he was like, "Man, like that's a tough call." I said, "It's right. At this age, you don't win much. Like as a kid, you win championship in the spring and in the winter. Now we're old geezers. We don't often win championships anymore. So the opportunity to win one." But I have to be here to bring the takes after game 3. And I know that, even if we won the game, I would still be like thinking during the game, like what's going on in the Bruins game. Now I got to see game 3. I've got to see it. But thank you, first of all, for the kind words. Secondly, I am shocked, Connor, shocked and very pleasantly surprised at the amount of like nice Maple Leafs fans in the comments, whether it be live or after. I was going through the comments because I'm like, man, I saw there's like almost like 50 comments. And I'm like, oh no, they found us, didn't they? And it's all like pretty positive. Very nice words from people from Toronto. So thank you. I appreciate it. I imagine things might get a little more heated throughout the series. It's 1-1 now. So we'll
As
see
it
where
usually
things
happens,
are at.
yeah.
We'll see where things are at towards the end. But Bruins and Leafs, we're recording this on Tuesday, tied at 1, headed back to Toronto. Bruins win game 1 by 5-1. Leafs win game 2, 3-2. Where are you at with this series? Initial thoughts?
I mean, I'm not too surprised, Evan, when you look at just the way these teams are matched up. I think it was easy to, after game 1 with the Bruins win 5-1, to think this is like, this is going to be 5 games. Like Toronto's defense, Samsonov, what have you, like they're going to land enough punches. And if they hold off guys like Matthews and Tavares and Marner, like that's an easy game plan. And like, again, like the Maple Leafs still have faults. We know that, but this is still a team that's not going to just roll over. Like one, they have way too much talent. And I think you saw in game 2, like this isn't like the, typical Toronto teams that maybe Bruins fans have mapped out in years past. Like, yes, there's deficiencies on defense, of course, but this isn't like a rush heavy team or a all skill finesse kind of team, right? Like this is a team that does a lot of its damage offensively off of a very, very good forecheck, off of a lot of shot generation from the slot. And you kind of saw it in that game on Tuesday. And I think game 2 is kind of, it's frustrating on the Bruins, Pat, because one, you've got, I think, a very good performance from Ullmark. Like if you're looking at the Bruins and how they mapped out the goalie rotation, that should have been like the perfect template of like Swayman was unreal in game 1, obviously. And Ullmark, I think, was very, very good as well. Like he did, I think, enough for you to win that game. But you look at the Bruins, and again, a lot of this is credit to Toronto and how aggressive they were on that forecheck and how committed they were there. But if you're the Bruins, like, I don't know, like my big takeaway from game 2 was it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Florida series. And again, like Florida probably has some bigger bodies out there that can do a whole lot of damage, but the same thing where the goaltending isn't as maybe flawed as it was last year against the Panthers, but a whole lot of the same things with the Bruins. A lot of self-inflicted miscues, a lot of pucks getting sailed into no man's land, a lot of really stagnant play in transition. It's just against a team like Toronto, you can't have those lapses. You can't have those miscues in terms of the breakout. You can't have these kind of stalled transition plays because a team like Toronto, one, their forecheck is too aggressive, and most importantly, like their talent is so impressive up front. They're going to bury you if you keep on spending time in your own zone. You saw that in that series. Like again, it was inevitable that a guy like Matthews was going to take over, but they've got enough guys that what happens if Tavares gets hot or like Mitch Marner
Mhm.
on that much impacts the game or William Nylander. Another reason why last game was a kind of a big whiff for the Bruins is like if Nylander comes back and you got a 98-point scorer your third line, so the guy that can finish a lot of chances in the bottom six if that's where they put him. So no surprises really in terms of I think what this Maple Leafs this current roster was advertised as, but I think Bruins fans expecting a walk in the park or a five game series. Not realistic the way these teams play.
You nailed it. The first goal Toronto scored in game 2. Forcing Hampus Lindholm to rim or puck around the wall, bounces to the front, Matthews hits the post, and then Domi puts it in. And it's like, that's what that line is for. That's why Domi and Bertuzzi play with a guy like Matthews, is to create chances like that. And you sort of see, similar tendencies, and you saw this in game 1 too. And I think the Bruins were better at it. Um, Toronto was playing similarly to how Florida took on Boston last year in the playoffs, of be aggressive on their D, make them make fast decisions, make them turn the puck over. And you saw that more in game 2. You saw that work in
Yeah.
Toronto's favor a lot more in game 2. And I think, that's where the Bruins start to run into trouble. And against a team like Toronto, like if you're gonna, we saw in game 1, Toronto turned the puck over a lot and coming out of their own zone. It led to Bruins scoring chances. Whether they scored on them or not, it still swung momentum. It was almost the opposite in game 2. I mean, you think about the amount of good chances Toronto had, and Linus Ullmark made a lot of big saves. Like
Yeah.
we'll get into the goalie rotation in a second, but like in a vacuum, game 2, Omar played great. I mean, Omar was the reason that game I thought was close. I thought you think about some of the big saves he made with his glove. There was one on Matthews from the high slot that he just kind
Yeah.
of got with his left pad. Um, and to me, like, they didn't come to play in game 2. And I think Toronto had much more urgency. And you mentioned like the Nylander thing. I mean, we know this. Listeners know this. Everyone knows this. When a guy comes back in a series of William Nylander's caliber, it changes things big time. And I think the fact, we'll get to Andrew Peeke in a second, the fact that like Andrew Peeke now is week to week, that is not
Oh,
good.
yeah.
And again, I don't mean to be doom and gloom, because I think we'd have a little more positive tone if the Bruins lost game 1 and then won game 2. Still 1-1. We expected this to be a close series. Wasn't gonna be easy for either team. I just think there were some things in game 2 Toronto adjusted to well. I mean, Carl pointed this out on the post-game show. Just stretch passing it. And the
Yeah.
Bruins just never adjusted to it. But my guess is they adjust to it in game 3, I would hope. You've got 2 days. You can look at the film.
Yeah. I mean, it's what playoff hockey is, right? It's a series of adjustments. Is one game you're feeling great that your team can take care of whoever it is in a 5 game series. People probably out after game 1. It's like, Florida's not that great, right? We can get past that team. Again, people are already looking in the second round, and I'm sure Toronto Maple Leafs fans probably thought it was doom and gloom after game 1. Same old story, and all of a sudden you're seeing kind of the identity and the approach they've had this year with adding a little bit more of that tenacity, that grit up front, a little more of an emphasis on the forechecking, and the game plan worked out perfectly. And again, like if you're Toronto, you clearly know what the strengths and weaknesses of your team, just as Bruins fans are well aware of it as well. But if you're a Maple Leafs fan, you're probably feeling great. Like Allmark played a great game, still came away with a win on the road without Nylander. So again, yeah, like I'm not throwing out doom and gloom. Like the Bruins have clear ways to kind of get back into this series. Like the defense and the goaltending for Toronto, I think, is still overall an area you should be able to exploit. The Bruins need to get their forecheck going. That's kind of been
Oh,
the main
yeah.
message. You look at 5-on-5 hockey so far in the series. Both Toronto and Boston are even in terms of goals scored at 3-3, but Toronto has a 58-27 edge in scoring chances. Like Bruins is still doing a whole lot of one and dones, not a lot of extended ozone time. And again, like it all is connected, right? Like Montgomery mentioned more on the forecheck, but also if you're not breaking the puck out, making clean passes, getting through the neutral zone, you're not going to really sustain a lot of that pressure on the other end of the ice as well. So, like the Bruins, they don't have to reinvent the wheel or do anything like that in terms of getting back into the series. But again, this whole series, and it's going to be for however far the Bruins go, is going to be these stages of adjustment and a lot of highs and lows along the way. If Bruins go into Scotiabank on Wednesday and come away with a 3-1 win, you feel great. Roll with Swayman the whole rest of the way. Like they can't stop this team on defense, but Toronto comes back and wins, and Nylander has 2 goals, and Matthews keeps out what he did in game 2. The doom and gloom will continue. It's kind of just what the playoffs are, aren't they, Evan?
They are. It is. It's the doom and gloom sometimes, which is fun. The highs and the lows. You got to live with them. Quick word from our friends before we get on with the rest of the show. Quick word from our friends over at Prize
Get
Picks.
in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a whole new level during basketball and hockey's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Picks has something for every sports fan, from basketball and hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in place even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, Prize Picks will have your back and not count that as a loss. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and a huge selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And with the Celtics season in full swing, there's plenty of opportunities to participate in Prize Picks. This week on Prize Picks, I'm selecting Jason Tatum for more than 30 points, Kristaps Porzingis for more than 2 blocks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, use code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And now let's get back to the show.
So the goaltending, both ends of the ice, I think is worthy of us going in depth on a bit. We'll start with Toronto's end before we get into the tandem. Samsonov had a really bad game 1. And when just coming out of game 1, my main takeaway was like, how does Toronto fix their defensive issues? Whether it be, coverage in the zone, whether it be moving the puck out, like how does that get fixed? And they did kind of fix it a little bit in game 2. They still allowed that Zaka goal, which like me, you, and Ty were looking at like, how do you let that happen? How is that
Yeah, look,
possible?
Snocko and Benoit and Jake McCabe are like along the boards or like in no man's land. And like it was, I think Tavares was the only guy down low there. I'm like, it's not what you want with a guy like David Pastrnak winding up for a shot.
Wide open in the slot. It was like Mike's hockey when you're a little kid and there's one person with the puck and everyone else just like skates as fast as they can towards the other end of the ice. So there was that, and Samsonov was better in game 2. He had that really big save on Brad Marchand late in that third period that would have tied the game. I think the biggest thing, and like again, I know the Bruins try to go for higher danger chances. I think that's good. I think that's really good when you're facing a Vasilevsky or an Ottinger or a Demko. When you're against a guy like Samsonov, you want to have some of that, but I do think you want to get more shots on net because he is shaky at times. The rebound control is not all there, especially in a place like the Garden where he has not had a good track record of. I think that's an area where like, all right, throw a couple surprise shots at him. I know they're not optimal. I know they're not high danger. You and I love high danger chances. Everybody loves high danger chances. But in that case, I just think, and for the rest of the series, you got to put a couple pucks on net that might stun him a bit.
Yeah, no. it is something where it's almost you have to go a little bit in between, right? Like the Bruins have had a lot of success under Montgomery with being more shot selective, maybe opting more for quality over quantity. It's not to say that you have to go with the Bruce Cassidy approach of like you pepper in from everywhere, end up being, 40 to 20, 21 in terms of the shots advantage or anything like that. But there is a give and take, right? It might depend on the matchup. And as you said, like Samsonov had a very good game too. And he can rise to the occasion, but man, it sure helps your case when you're just firing pucks on net. And there's been a couple of times in that game too, right, where Peeke before he was injured had a clear shooting lane and he kind of deferred a little bit. There was Zaka on that shorthanded chance where you wish he just like threw a backhander on net because there's massive bodies down there. There's a time and place for some of those situations, and Montgomery mentioned it on Tuesday before they went to Toronto of being smarter with the shot selection, like knowing, having the patience of when to fire in pucks, but also knowing when to generate the shot when the lane is there. I know there's probably in times they've been reinforced to opt for the high danger chance, but if there's a clear shooting lane and there's a massive bodies down low, and that's something that Montgomery has kind of stressed all year. They've done a pretty good job at it in terms of crashing guys towards the net. But if the puck's not going to be there, it's not going to. Those chances aren't going to be there for the Bruins. So again, it's going back to basics for the Bruins offensively. Like it's establishing the forecheck, getting that rolling, forcing Toronto's puck carriers, especially their defensemen, to, put them under duress, which again, beyond Riley, like there are some weak spots there in terms of putting the pressure on them and having them cough up pucks, as was the case for your decor in game two. But then it comes down to in terms of having the puck in the offensive zone, like this is a goal that you just need to get pucks on net towards. And if your guys are adhering to the proper details of putting guys down low, being aggressive on the forecheck, opportunities should be there for you in this series. That's the only way you're going to, there's going to be a couple of these games, whether it's Toronto just taking over with the talent they have, or you're going to have to claw back in some of these games. Like I think we mentioned before this round started, I'm not surprised in one of these games, Toronto's up 2-0 in the first 10 minutes of a game. And you have the means to claw back in that game against this type of team, but all comes down to how you adhere to those details in the offensive zone.
It is. And again, like in a series like this where you do not have the 5-on-5 scoring advantage, you don't have the horses, you can't go tit for tat scoring goals with them. Like you have the advantage there that you can face a guy like Samsonov. And we talked about this prior to the series. Like these teams are almost polar opposites. Like that's the wild part. And you see it in both teams' forechecks. Like one is the Bruins are more passive, looking for the Maple Leafs to make mistakes, have to make decisions. Whereas the Maple Leafs are super aggressive, trying to get their defensemen to turn pucks over and then get scoring chances that way. So I agree. You need some more shots on Samsonov. The Bruins goalie tandem. That was the talk. That was the big storyline going into game two. But first, a quick word. Ooh,
my goodness.
It's shocking.
You need me to take over the ad read for you, Evan?
Yeah, can you jump in? Anyways, while I go drink some water, a quick word from our friends over at Factor Meals. Thank you, Connor. I want to tell you about our friends over at Factor Meals. Eat stress-free this spring with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including popular options like Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Also, discover more than 60 add-ons every week, like breakfast, on-the-go lunch, snacks and beverages to help you stay fueled and feel good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started today and fuel up your springtime goals. Get chef-prepared meals on the table in 2 minutes with Factor's ready-to-eat meals so you can get back to doing what you love this spring. Looking for gourmet meals? Try meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, truffle butter, broccolini, and asparagus. And we're celebrating Earth Day all month long. Look out for the Earth Month Eats badge on the menu for our lowest carbon footprint meals. So head to factormeals.com/Bruins50 and use code Bruins50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code Bruins50 at factormeals.com/Bruins50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active. Now, back to the show. The goalie tandem. Swayman, Omar, Ullman, Swayman. Omen Swaymark.
The Ullman Brothers band, but
Oh my god, I've been talking too much lately. I've
is
been talking
Ullman
too much.
like is that like when like the Dragon Ball Z characters like team up and they become
No,
like
I
one super
combined
goalie?
them.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
exactly it. The Ullman and Swaymark, they're just
Yes.
outstanding. Those two are great together.
Tell you what, if there's ever
Um,
a way to bamboozle the Maple Leafs, it's like you just have them out with brand new jerseys. They'd be like, who the hell is this guy?"
who are these guys? I
Yes.
mean, it's like when Montgomery had Lindholm and McAvoy practicing prior to game one, and the Leafs like, oh, it's going to be a super pairing, and then they switched them up, and Sheldon Keefe was like,
Force.
boo, like he couldn't,
Yes.
couldn't handle it. Um, Olmark and Swayman. I'm now it's in my head. This is gonna make the yips. Swayman starts game one, 35 save win. Olmark comes in for game two. First of all, did you think it was the right move to go back to Olmark?
I was leaning more towards riding the hot hand with Swayman just because I think it all comes down to circumstances, right? And like Swayman has just been so good against Toronto that I think Ty Anderson mentioned this. Like at that point, if he goes up and shuts them down again in game two, and he's what 6-0-0 against Toronto, dating back to last year, there starts being in your head a little bit if you're Toronto in terms of like this guy is just not budging at all. That being said, like you can make the argument for going with Omar too of keeping the rotation in place. Maybe the Bruins are going to alternate or through games 1, 2, 3, and 4 and then go from there. Maybe it's more of a field-based approach. I think we've said it on this podcast before, are more along the lines of like you have the net till you lose. So we'll see what happens in game 3. Like I have to imagine it's going to be Swayman again, but if he again, we'll see. Like we're getting ahead, but if he wins game 3, I think you keep him in net till he loses. And again, like you can make the argument, like what happens if you win in 4 games or 5 games in a series? Well, that's a great problem to have. You deal with that afterwards. You reset the
Oh
clock.
shucks.
Yeah,
In 5 games.
if that
Damn it.
happens and if Swayman goes through a 4 game stretch where he's 4-0 with a 981 save percent or something like that, you'll take that and then you go to the next round, survive in advance, then you reset the clock and maybe go from there again. Like as long as a guy I think is winning, I think you keep it like that and go from there. So again, a compelling case to be made on both sides in terms of Olmark and Swayman of who was going to give the net in game 2. I would have leaned Swayman. That being said, I don't think Olmark was the reason he lost that game. I think you put Jeremy Swayman in there, who has played excellent against Toronto. I don't know if it would have changed the outcome. If you're fumbling around the puck and playing with fire in your D zone against a team with guys like Austin Matthews and what have you, probably still going to get burned. Like I don't know. I think it wouldn't have impacted how that game would have went with that defense and that breakup being so lax against Toronto in that game.
I was leaning Swayman going into game 2. I was, I know I've been a big proponent of the tandem, but just how good he'd been. It was like, all right, like give him a shot. Um, as you said though, that's not why they lost game 2. Like Omar is not the reason. Omar played fine. To me, the interesting thing is what do you do going forward? So obviously Swayman starts game 3, right? You clearly are going with the rotation. So Swayman starts game 3. If he goes into Toronto on Wednesday night and has a 34 save win where they win 4-2 or something, you do have to really heavily, as you said, consider Swayman for starting game 4. I think the worry is, let's say, Swayman keeps playing really well. And then, you get to game, even if he loses one of those games, get to game 6 or something, and he starts to show like he's running out of gas. Well, then, yes, you can go back to Linus Olmark.
Yeah.
My initial thought after Monday's game 2 was, okay, you'll do the tandem through 4 games. And then for 5, 6, and 7, you'll kind of reevaluate. But I agree with you also in the sense that, like, if Swayman's kicking ass, you do have like that point that'd be 6-0 this season. Like you do need to heavily consider going with him again. I think it wasn't a bad idea though to go to Olmark in game 2 because as we saw last year, and they know this, everybody knows this. Olmark was not the problem until late in that series when he clearly ran out of gas. I mean, he
Yeah.
had something lingering, but he ran out of gas too. And I think the fear is that like, okay, you run Swayman, through game 5, and by like game 6, he is clearly just sort of toast. And then you got to throw Olmark. It's the revert. It's basically like what happened last year. So I don't think we'll look back I don't know what scenario we would look back at the tandem and be like, what a horrible idea. I mean, if they stuck with it truly throughout, right? Like if it was Swayman Olmark until through game 7, right? They just kept doing it and they lost and Swayman won like all of his games and Olmark like lost all of his games, then I think you'd be like, okay, this is a hard second guess. Like that was a bad idea. But through 2 games, I'm not I'm not questioning it. But as it goes along, I think how they handle 5, 6, and 7 will be the real test.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that's just what the challenge is, right? We've mentioned this since, what was it, November, when Montgomery first mentioned the fact they were interested in keeping the goalie rotation going. Like, there's going to be a whole lot of second guesses, and you won't have the full picture until the series is over, and then you move on to the next round. You go through the same set of questions as again. Like, again, through 2 games, I don't think the goaltending has been the issue. Like, both guys gave you a chance to win. Swayman obviously was fantastic. I think Olmark was very, very good in game 2 as well. And I don't know if like I've seen people mention that like, oh, like they got more up for Swayman, but not in the second half of the regular season. I don't know if you watched from January through April when Swayman had a 903 save percentage, but like I'm not buying into them going rah off of one goalie and net over
No.
the other there. But again, it's going to be a lot of give and take. It's going to be a lot of, I think, feel based in terms of how Montgomery wants to structure these things. I agree that it feels like right now, at least, they're leaning towards like switching off through the first 4 games. But if Swayman wins game 3 and you got a good problem on your hands, like, I don't know, I feel like you'd be very tempted to ride the hot hand there and give him the net till he loses.
That's the thing. And like games 1 and 2 in a series can be kind of for not testing things out, but sort of, you can play with things a bit. It's not full do or die. Obviously, you want to win games 1 and 2. You don't want to fall behind 2-0 like the New York Islanders right now. But you do,
Yikes.
yeah, it's tough. You do, though, get to play with some things. Lineup wise, if you still have questions, obviously the goaltending thing. But you're right. If Swayman's just outstanding in game 3, how do you not? Like at that point in Toronto, chance to win game 4 and come back up 3-1. How do you not? Um, so again, I don't know. I think at that point you do have to stick with Jeremy Swayman. But this is what it's all led to. This is what the whole season's led to. Just every playoff series the Bruins go into, this is gonna be the
What a
storyline of
time.
who's starting, who's not. I liked Montgomery's line of I don't tell my wife, so why would I tell you? His wife's sitting at home like, what?
I
Why
mean,
won't he? I don't get why he won't tell me this.
the Wordle vowel clue thing messed me up because my dumbass was like in the middle of the press conference, like like trying to visualize the names, like Wheel of Fortune, and like, oh, I'm a dipshit. So
Yeah, you came to it. It was like, it's like when someone's
yeah,
like spell race car backwards, and you're like,
yeah,
RACE. Oh, damn, it's the same thing. So it's like
yep.
kind of what you came to. Um, I assume this is not the last time we're going to talk goaltending, so
I don't think so, Evan.
I don't want to beat a dead.
It's bold proclamation, but I feel like we will resume these conversations in a couple of days.
It will happen again. It will happen again. I think one of the sneaky momentum shifting things of this series could be the loss of Andrew Peeke. You want to get into this? Like, to me, he's your secondary shutdown guy. He is, you can rely on him for PK minutes. Toronto scores with Shattenkirk out there. I think I saw Ty Anderson tweeted out that Shattenkirk's been on the ice for 6 minutes total this year of PK time.
Yeah, it's not great.
6 minutes. And you have him out there, which again, you had to. It's not like, oh, stupid Montgomery. Like you run in 5D, you've got to, rotate them correctly. And I think this presents a real problem for them in terms of matchups, especially if Nylander comes back. Now, if he's on that third line and you've got talent spread out, that's kind of a mismatch, especially with Toronto getting last change in these next 2 games. And I think you have to figure out, do you want Shattenkirk back in there for game 3? Like, obviously Wotherspoon, it seems like is going to come back. Forbert isn't ready yet. But Lowry was up practicing on Tuesday. What do you think?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough call. Again, as you said, I think Witherspoon's the natural guy that's going to slot in there. It's a shame that, like, one, that Peake's hurt, because as you said, like, he's been a sneaky great pickup for this postseason. He plays a very simple game, but, like, block shots, can throw a hit, like does the simple things that I think you want out of a third pairing defenseman, especially in the playoffs. So losing him's a tough hit. Weatherspoon goes in there. You would have liked to see Weatherspoon and Peeke for, to start this playoff series. I think I don't know why Weatherspoon kind of fell out of favor. I think a lot of it has to do with Shattenkirk and him kind of getting hot at the end of the year and the need to maybe switch things up on the power play. But look at that Florida game, I think down in Florida against the Panthers, where it was Weatherspoon and Peeke, and they got a lot of the minutes against Bennett and Kachuk in that line
Yeah.
and played really well in that game. It's like, all right, that should lock them in. That's your third pair. No
But nope.
frills, mean
Goodbye.
potatoes kind of group. Yeah. Like, and I think it's too bad we're not maybe going to get that until Peeke comes back, whenever that is. So, yeah, I think Weatherspoon slots in for him. But then, yeah, you have a question as to like, do you put in Lohrei over a guy like Shattenkirk or Grizzly, what have you? Like, I think probably Shattenkirk would be first in line, but you run the risk, right? Like Lohrei, I think you can see where his strengths are. Like, he's a shot first defenseman. He will get pucks on net. He's a left shot guy that, like, you might be tempted to put on that power play if you want to, make things a little bit easier with some of those seam passes, get more pucks on net. Like, maybe he can give you a lift there, but you're also asking a whole lot for a guy that you look at what Toronto's good at on the forecheck, pressuring defensemen, making them make kind of ill-advised passes. You could be playing with fire there with a guy like Lohrei as well. So you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't in terms of how they want to structure things. But I agree that Weatherspoon makes sense. But if Montgomery really wants to change things up, a guy like Lohrei could be someone they turn to, especially if it could be more of a game 4 thing where if like the Bruins transition game and offense really continues to kind of stagnate, maybe you're like, screw it, throw in Lohrei, see what you can get out of him, see if you can generate something there. Because right now it just seems like the Bruins are kind of stuck in neutral right now.
I was going to say, I feel like the play for game 3 would be more keep it a little more conservative with Wotherspoon and Shattenkirk. And then if they lose that, and as you said, if their breakouts stink, if they're turning pucks over, if Shattenkirk is clearly outmatched in his own zone, you bring in a guy like Lohrei and try to spark some stuff. The interesting name you mentioned there is Grizzly. Grizzly was taking a lot of heat last night in that post-game show. Commenters were not happy about Matt
Ryan
Grizzly.
Reeves was like the
That
Pointer
was
brothers when he saw him out there.
I was next to Matt Doloff last night, and Reeves dumped the puck in Grizzly's corner and went after him, and I like almost grabbed. I was like, oh no, here it comes, and I think the tough part about Grizzly is like, he took that penalty on Tavares, which was unfortunate. But then, there are clearly times he's outmatched in the D zone, especially against bigger guys, and Toronto goes after him, no doubt. But he can move the puck up ice. Like, that was one, I remember last year in that Florida series, if memory serves, he didn't see much playing time at all in that second half of that series, right? Like,
They switched him out when he really didn't. He was on that play that led to the Olmark turnover in overtime for Kachuk in Game 5. I put that more on Olmark, but then you took him out for Game 6. You put in Clifton and Fulbert, and the Bruins got their teeth knocked out of their friggin' head.
I was gonna say
off of the forecheck in Game 6.
Oh my god!
People forget about that. Like, and again, like, listen, like, Grizzly has his faults, as we saw even in Game 2. But in terms of making the quick passes, like when he's not kind of retrieving pucks, he probably gives you more than maybe a guy like Shattenkirk in that regard. And as opposed to like what the other alternatives could be. It's like, I think people forget that Game 6. That was, Bruins should have scored enough goals against Bobrovsky in that series. They should have ended things. And their breakout in their transition game got smashed in the mouth in that series. So
that was awful. People
Again,
forget about that.
It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, there are people who can make a very compelling case for why Grizzly isn't equipped for the playoffs, but you have to look at what also the alternatives are there and what they do and whether they're better equipped to handle the forechecking pressure that's not going to be changing for Toronto. Like, that's a pretty good formula they have. They're not going to alter it really that much.
No, and I think, again, like, to me, I'm not taking Grizzly out of the lineup yet. I'm not. And I know defensively there are problems. I get it. I get that. As you said, there are real arguments for why he shouldn't be in this series or shouldn't be in the playoffs, but he can move the puck and he's elusive and he can exit the zone on his own and he makes smart passes. Like, I need that because we saw it last year. We've seen it, at times. You saw it with Lindholm. I thought Hampus Lindholm did not have a good game on Monday night after a really strong Game 1.
Yeah.
Him and Carlo were dynamite. I think Carlo's been the best defenseman through the 2 games. But
not a lot of defensemen had good games in Game 2. McAvoy, I think, had an awful Game 2. too.
Yeah,
Game
McAvoy
2,
also was not
2.
great.
Yeah.
Game 2-2. Game Jordan
Yes.
2-2.
Yes.
But, again, to me, like, I think you leave Grzelcyk in there for that. Now, again, if he gets dummied in games 3 and 4, then, like, yeah, you got to make a decision there. But in terms of just puck movement and transition game, that is kind of what I want out of him. So losing Peeke is not good. I wouldn't say this podcast was all doom and gloom, but I will offer this. It's only 2 games. It's only been 2 games. 1-1. We knew this was going to be a close series. Here's the $1 million question. What did you predict going into this series? I didn't see it.
I had Bruins in 6. I just think that Toronto's
So
a
did
very,
I.
very good offensive team. Yeah, they have strengths, and I think you see that maybe Bruins fans shouldn't take for granted in terms of how they set up their game plan and their approach offensively. It's a pretty good formula to have when you've got that much talent with really good forechecking pressure. That being said, like I think the Bruins still have the clear advantage in net. And again, if they kind of get their act together and don't fire passes into no man's land, break the puck out, possess the puck, win puck battles, which like this team should be able to do. You saw that for stretches in game 1. They should be able to land punches against Samsonov in this defense. Not to say that Samsonov, you put 40 pucks on him, he's going to give up 5 goals every time. Like he had a really good game too, but it's a pretty good winning formula, and the odds more favor you if you ramp up that pressure against that kind of defense. So again, it's going to be a tight series. It's going to be a lot of either 5-4 games or a lot of just tight games like 3-2, like we saw in game 2. But I still think the Bruins have clear advantages. That if the Bruins tighten up their game and adhere to kind of the simple details that this team is usually pretty good at, you should be able to come out on top. But again, don't take this Toronto team for granted.
So you're not feeling differently about the series than you were at the
Not
beginning?
yet. It was, I
No,
think, as expected.
neither am I. Some people in the comments last night were like, "Oh, you should, I don't get it, Evan. You should be more, And I'm like, no, we knew it was gonna be a close series. Toronto made the necessary adjustments going into game 2. They executed them well. They were a little bit better. Bruins will make adjustments going into game 3, hopefully.
Yes. I also cannot remember the last time like the Bruins won a game 2 on home ice in the playoffs. I think it's like
It has been a
it
long
is like a
time.
scheduled loss every single time.
It is. I was thinking about that last time. Like, they're losing this. Like, because that's what they do. I remember in 2019 when they played. Oh no, they won game 2, right?
They
The Bruins lost game 1.
they had a pretty lopsided game 1, a loss against Toronto, and then like they had like 5 penalties. I feel like it was a super physical game in game 2, and they came back and won that one. So that was kind
That
of
was the
flipping the
game
script,
when
but it feels like
DeBrusque was cross in the face, right? By Kadri.
by Kadri, yeah. So, but usually, and especially the last couple of years, it's been game 2 dud on home ice. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. By the way, I think Jake DeBrusque's been pretty good through these first 2 games. I've
yep,
liked what I've seen.
moving his
Game 2
feet,
wasn't as
winning
noticeable.
pucks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good in his own zone in game 2, but again, needs to make more of an impact on the score sheet 5-on-5. So,
yeah,
um,
bad clear. He also should have cleared that puck for
that's
Tavares'
right.
goal, but
That's right. You're
so
100%
not
right.
perfect, not perfect, but
No,
moving his
no,
feet, trying to make things happen.
it's encouraging. There's signs. It's like, oh, it's right. He's right there. He can do it. Anyways, Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we'll break down this series and this playoff run for however long it goes for the Bruins with recaps, features, columns, breakdowns, all that good stuff. So you can read all of it at boston.com and the Globe. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Connor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. Bruins Beat listeners, have a great rest